I never thought I'd find myself staring at a piece of wood like it held the secrets of the universe. But there I was, in the middle of a dusty workshop that smelled like cedar and sawdust, completely mesmerized by the grain pattern in a plank of oak. Or maybe I was mesmerized by the man holding it. His name was Finn, and he was teaching me carpentry in my uncle's old workshop, and I was pretty sure I was falling apart in ways that had nothing to do with the furniture we were building. It started 3 months ago when I moved back home after college. I had this fancy degree in marketing that felt completely meaningless when I couldn't land a job that didn't make me want to crawl out of my skin. My parents were patient about it, but I could see the concern in their eyes every morning when I came down for coffee in my pajamas at 11. So when my uncle mentioned he knew a carpenter who was looking for an apprentice, someone to help with the summer rush of custom furniture orders, I figured why not? I needed something to do with my hands, something real and tangible, and maybe some physical work would clear my head. The first day I met Finn, he was planing a board, these long, smooth strokes that sent curls of wood spiraling to the floor. He looked up when I walked in, and I swear time did that thing it's not supposed to do in real life, that slow-motion moment where you notice everything at once. He had these green eyes that caught the light coming through the workshop windows, dark hair that fell across his forehead, and forearms that showed every muscle as he worked. He was maybe 5 years older than me, late 20s, with sawdust in his hair and a half-smile that made my stomach do something complicated. "Hey, you must be Dylan," he said, setting down the plane and wiping his hands on his jeans. "Your uncle told me you'd be coming by. I'm Finn." I shook his hand, which was rough with calluses and warm, and I held on maybe a second too long before catching myself. "Yeah, that's me. Thanks for taking me on. I should warn you I don't know anything about woodworking." "That's fine," he said. "I'd rather teach someone from scratch than undo bad habits." "You ready to get dusty?" I spent that first week learning the basics. How to read wood grain, how to measure twice and cut once, the names of tools I'd never heard of. Finn was patient, explaining things in this calm voice that made even my mistakes feel like part of the learning process. He'd stand beside me at the workbench, guiding my hands on the saw, adjusting my grip, showing me the angle. And every time he touched me, even casually, even just to correct my form, I felt this electric current run through my body that I tried desperately to ignore. I'd never been good at ignoring things, though. That was kind of my problem. In college, I'd dated a girl named Sarah for 2 years, and it was fine, comfortable, but there was always this disconnect I couldn't name. She'd want to know what I was thinking, and I never had an answer because I was usually thinking about how I should be feeling more than I did. We broke up amicably before graduation, and she told me she hoped I'd figure out what I was looking for. At the time, I didn't know what she meant. Now, watching Finn's hands move over wood with such confidence and care, I was starting to understand. The thing is, I'd always noticed men. In high school, I'd chalked it up to admiration or competition. In college, I'd called it aesthetic appreciation, like I was some kind of art critic of the human form. But this felt different. This felt like want, raw and undeniable, and it scared the hell out of me. It was the third week when everything shifted. We were working on a dining table, a custom piece for a client who wanted something rustic but elegant. Finn had taught me the basics of sanding, but I was struggling with keeping even pressure, leaving some areas smoother than others. I could see the frustration building in my shoulders, the way I was tensing up and making it worse. "Stop," Finn said softly, coming up behind me. "You're fighting it. Here, let me show you." He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of him against my back. His chest pressed lightly against my shoulder blades as he reached around me, his hands covering mine on the sanding block. I stopped breathing. I'm pretty sure my heart stopped too. "Feel the motion," he said, his voice right by my ear. "It's not about pressure, it's about rhythm. Let the sandpaper do the work. Like this." He guided my hands in long, smooth strokes, his body moving with mine. I could smell him, sawdust and something else, maybe cedar or his shampoo, something clean and woodsy. His breath was warm against my neck, and I was acutely aware of every point where our bodies touched. His chest against my back, his arms around mine, his hands over my hands. "See," he said, smooth and steady. "You feel the difference?" I felt a lot of things, but I managed to nod. Yeah, I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. I feel it. He stayed there for a moment longer, and I wondered if he could feel my heart pounding, if he noticed the way I'd gone completely still. Then he stepped back, and the absence of him felt like a physical loss. Practice that for a while, he said. I'm going to cut the legs. I practiced, but I couldn't focus. My mind was replaying those moments over and over, the weight of him against my back, the way his voice had dropped lower, the casual intimacy of it that felt anything but casual to me. I kept glancing over at him as he worked, watching the concentration on his face, the sure movements of his hands, and I felt something settling into place inside me, some truth I'd been avoiding for years. That night, lying in bed, I let myself think it for the first time. I'm attracted to him. I'm attracted to men. I might be gay. The words felt huge in my head, terrifying and liberating at the same time. I grabbed my phone and started typing into the search bar, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted it. Finally, I just typed, "How do you know if you're gay?" and spent the next 2 hours reading coming out stories and articles about sexual orientation, feeling like I was reading my own experience reflected back at me. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about all the times I'd felt disconnected from relationships with women, all the times I'd noticed men, and told myself it didn't mean anything, all the ways I'd been lying to myself. And I thought about Finn, about the way my whole body had come alive when he touched me, the way I felt seen and nervous and excited all at once. The next day at the workshop, I was weird. I knew I was being weird. I couldn't look at Finn directly, kept fumbling with tools, measuring the same board 3 times because I couldn't focus. He noticed, of course he noticed, but he didn't call me out on it. He just kept working, kept teaching, his presence both comforting and completely overwhelming. Around lunch, he set down his chisel and looked at me. "You okay, Dylan? You seem off today." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just didn't sleep well." He nodded slowly, like he didn't quite believe me, but wasn't going to push. We ate our sandwiches in companionable silence, sitting on the workbench with our legs dangling. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't know what or how. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to Finn in new ways. Not just how he looked, though I definitely noticed that, but who he was. I noticed how he always made coffee for both of us in the morning, remembering that I took mine with too much sugar. I noticed how he talked to wood like it was alive, telling it what it was going to become. I noticed how he'd get this little crease between his eyebrows when he was concentrating, and how his whole face transformed when he smiled, really smiled, at something I said. I noticed that he never mentioned dating anyone, never talked about a girlfriend or weekend plans that involved anyone else. He lived alone in a small house near the workshop, and sometimes, after long days, he'd invite me over for a beer. We'd sit on his back porch as the sun went down, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about learning carpentry from his grandfather, about how working with wood made him feel connected to something timeless. I told him about my useless degree and my confusion about what I wanted from life, and he listened like my words mattered. One evening, sitting on that porch with the fireflies coming out and the cicadas singing, he asked me about relationships. "You ever been in love, Dylan?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about Sarah, about the careful affection I'd felt that never quite became passion. "I don't think so," I said honestly. "I thought I was once, but looking back, I think I was just going through the motions." He nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "I get that. I've done that too." Something in his tone made me brave. "Yeah? Yeah. Spent most of my early 20s trying to be what people expected. Dated girls, did the whole traditional thing, never felt right." My heart was pounding. What changed? He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. I stopped lying to myself about who I was attracted to, stopped pretending I didn't notice men the way I was supposed to notice women. Came out when I was 25, and it was the scariest and best thing I ever did. I sat there, processing this, feeling like he'd just handed me a key to a door I'd been standing in front of for months. "How did you know?" I asked. "For sure, I mean." He turned to look at me, and in the fading light, his eyes were serious and kind. I think part of me always knew, but I really knew when I met someone who made me feel alive in a way I'd never felt before, when being around them made everything brighter and more real, when I couldn't stop thinking about them, couldn't imagine not being near them. That's when I couldn't deny it anymore. We looked at each other, and something passed between us, some understanding or question or possibility. I wanted to ask if he felt that way about anyone now, wanted to know if maybe he'd noticed the way I looked at him, but I couldn't form the words. Instead, I just nodded and looked away, my face hot. The summer was moving forward, and we were finishing the dining table. It was beautiful, the wood glowing with the finish we'd applied, smooth as silk under my hands. Finn stood back, admiring it, and there was pride in his expression. "You did good work on this, Dylan. You've got a real feel for it." "I learned from the best," I said, and meant it. He smiled at me, that full smile that made my chest tight. "You're a natural. You ever think about doing this for real, making a career of it?" I hadn't, but suddenly I was. The idea of spending my days like this, creating beautiful things with my hands, working beside Finn, felt right in a way nothing else ever had. "Maybe," I said, "I'd need a lot more training." "I could teach you," he said quietly, "if you wanted to stick around." "I'd like that," I said, and we stood there in the workshop, surrounded by sawdust and the smell of wood finish, and I felt like I was standing at the edge of something important. That weekend, Finn invited me to a barbecue at his friend's house. "It's just a casual thing," he said. "Some people from town, good food, you should come." I almost said no, anxiety spiking at the thought of meeting his friends, being in a social situation where I didn't know anyone. But then I looked at him, at the hope in his expression, and I couldn't refuse. "Okay," I said, "yeah, I'll come." The barbecue was in a backyard full of string lights and laughter. Finn introduced me to everyone, his hand on my back, casual but warm. These were his people, I realized, his chosen family, and they were mostly queer, couples of all configurations, people who seemed completely comfortable in their skin. I felt like an outsider at first, but they welcomed me easily, asking about the carpentry work, teasing Finn about being a perfectionist. There was a moment when I was getting drinks from the cooler, and one of Finn's friends, a guy named Marcus, came up beside me. "So, you're the apprentice," he said with a knowing smile. "Finn talks about you a lot." "He does?" "Oh yeah, Dylan this, Dylan that. Kid's got real talent, picks things up so fast, made this beautiful joint on his first try." Marcus laughed. "I've known Finn for 5 years, and I've never heard him talk about anyone the way he talks about you." I didn't know what to say to that. My heart was racing, hope and fear tangled together. "We're just working together," I managed. Marcus gave me a look that said he didn't believe that for a second. "Sure. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He seemed happier these past few months than I've seen him in a long time." He walked away, leaving me standing there with 2 beers and a head full of possibilities. I looked across the yard and found Finn watching me. When our eyes met, he smiled, and I smiled back, and something in the air between us felt charged with potential. Later, driving back to my house, Finn was quiet. I kept replaying Marcus's words, wondering if they were true, if Finn really talked about me like that. We pulled up to my parents' house, and I should have just said thanks and gotten out, but instead I turned to him. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said. "Do you?" I started, then stopped. This was terrifying. "Do you ever feel like there's something between us? Something more than just teacher and student?" In the dim light from the dashboard, I saw his expression change, surprise and something else, something that looked like relief. "Yeah, Dylan. I do." My breath caught. "Really? Really?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking nervous for the first time since I'd met him. "I've been trying not to push, trying to let you figure things out on your own time. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable or put pressure on you, but yeah, I feel it. I felt it almost from the beginning. I'm figuring things out," I said, "about myself, about what I want. And I think I know that part of what I want is you." He reached across the space between us and took my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. "We can take this slow," he said, "as slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere." That night, I lay in bed, feeling like my whole life had just reorganized itself around this new truth. I was attracted to men. I was attracted to Finn, And he was attracted to me too. It felt huge and scary and absolutely right. The next week at the workshop was different. We were still working, still teaching and learning, but there was this new awareness between us. Finn would brush past me and let his hand linger on my shoulder. I'd lean in closer than necessary when he was showing me something. We'd catch each other's eyes and smile, this secret thing between us. It was Friday afternoon when we finished the final piece of the dining set, a bench that matched the table. We stood back, admiring our work, and I felt this surge of accomplishment and happiness. "We make a good team," Finn said. "Yeah," I agreed, "we really do." He turned to me, and there was something in his expression, something vulnerable and open. "Dylan, would you want to have dinner with me tonight? Like an actual date?" My heart felt too big for my chest. "I'd love that." We went to a small Italian place on the edge of town, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. It felt simultaneously monumental and completely natural, sitting across from him, talking and laughing over pasta and red wine. He told me about his dreams of opening his own furniture shop someday. I told him about how I'd spent so long trying to figure out what I wanted that I'd never considered I might already be doing it. After dinner, we walked through the town square, and without thinking about it, I reached for his hand. He laced his fingers through mine, and we walked like that, hand in hand, and I felt more myself than I ever had. We ended up back at his house, sitting on the porch again, but this time there was no space between us on the bench. His arm was around my shoulders, and I was leaning into him, feeling the solid warmth of him against my side. "I'm glad you answered that ad," he said quietly. "Glad your uncle knew me. Glad you walked into that workshop." "Me too," I said, even though I had no idea what I was getting into. He laughed softly. "Did you ever imagine this?" "Us?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm really glad it's happening." He turned toward me, and his face was close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, close enough that I could feel his breath. "Can I kiss you?" I answered by closing the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. It was soft at first, tentative, and then it deepened, his hand coming up to cup my face, my fingers curling into his shirt. It felt like coming home, like finding something I didn't know I'd been searching for my entire life. When we pulled apart, I was breathless. "Wow," I said, and he laughed, resting his forehead against mine. "Yeah," he agreed. "Wow." Over the next few months, I fell in love with him in pieces. I fell for the way he hummed while he worked, always old folk songs his grandfather had taught him. I fell for the patience he showed when I messed up, the way he'd just smile and say we'd fix it together. I fell for his hands, those capable hands that could shape wood into beauty and hold me with such tenderness. I fell for his laugh, unexpected and bright. I fell for the way he looked at me, like I was something precious and worth cherishing. I came out to my parents on a Sunday afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table with sweaty palms and a racing heart. I told them I was gay, that I was dating Finn, that I'd never been happier or more sure of anything. My mom cried, but they were good tears, and she hugged me tight. My dad was quiet, processing, but then he shook my hand and said he just wanted me to be happy. It wasn't perfect, but it was okay, and that was enough. I kept working with Finn, learning everything he could teach me. We started taking on bigger projects together, and he began introducing me as his partner, both in business and in life. I moved out of my parents' house and into his place, and we fell into this rhythm of working together during the day and coming home to each other at night. One evening, we were finishing up a rocking chair, the last piece of a nursery set. Finn was doing the final sanding, and I was watching him work, just admiring the concentration on his face. He looked up and caught me staring. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Just thinking about that first time you showed me how to sand," I said, "when you stood behind me and guided my hands." He set down the sandpaper and came over to me, pulling me close. "Best teaching moment of my life," he said. "Best learning moment of mine," I replied. He kissed me, soft and sweet, and I wrapped my arms around him, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and him. This life we were building together, piece by piece, moment by moment, felt solid and true, like a well-made joint that would hold forever. I never expected to find myself in a dusty workshop falling in love with a carpenter who taught me more than just how to work with wood. He taught me how to be honest with myself, how to build something real and lasting, how to sand away the rough edges and find the beautiful grain underneath. He taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from starting over, from learning something new, from being brave enough to let someone stand close and guide your hands until you find your own rhythm. And every time I pick up a piece of sandpaper now, every time I feel the smooth glide of wood under my hands, I think about that moment when everything changed, when his chest was pressed against my back, and I finally understood what I'd been missing all along. Not just the carpentry, but this, him, us, the life we're building together with patience and care and love.